2 Peter chapter 1. So we've been talking about the recipe for Christ likeness. And starting with verse 5, and besides this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity. And so we've gone through the first few characteristics. And last time we talked a little bit about self-control, or that, of course, would be the temperance. And so we talked about how in Romans 12, 1 and 2, it tells us that it's our reasonable service. And we asked ourselves that question, who has my heart? Does my heart belong to the Lord? Or does my heart belong to the world? That's what you... and we know that you can't go back and forth between the two and be successful in either one of them. So you have to choose who you're going to serve. So we ask ourselves, who has my heart? We talked a little bit about the first few characteristics. Virtue, or salvation, of course, is where our heart is captured for Christ. And then knowledge informs our heart for Christ. And so then we started talking about the temperance, or the self-control. A lot of today's Christians don't have a separated or a distinctively Christian life. They think it's okay to be a part of the world as long as it's not too much. It's okay if you drink as long as you don't drink too much. And it's okay to use bad language as long as you don't do it too much. And it's okay to be greedy as long as you're not too greedy. So all of these things, and of course there's many others. Those are just some common ones. A lot of people, a lot of these Christians also believe that if it's not specifically spoken against in the Bible, that it's okay to do it. For example, the Bible doesn't specifically mention smoking, but it does talking about how our bodies are a holy temple for the Lord. So that was kind of where we were last time, and we talked about anything that could be a hindrance to the effectiveness of the gospel was something that we needed to get rid of. Activities that were useless, activities that don't edify others, or simply an activity that can have control over our lives is enough reason to want to get rid of those. But those are all good reasons to separate our lives and get rid of these habits and things that are not edifying to others or edifying to the Lord. Self-control is also listed in the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5. And so that was, we stopped, we started talking about the self-control, and then self-control leads into the characteristic we're going to talk about today, and that's patience. So it says, add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge, to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience. And we know, of course, that patience is something that, we've always been told, don't pray for patience, because you might get it. And we don't want the Lord to, because how do you get patience? By going through trials and temptations, by being subjected to things. As a former elementary teacher, I believe that children were placed here to teach us patience, because there were one. I can think of one child, an example in specific. He kept asking me, what he had 10 cents in his pocket, and he wanted to go to snack time, and he wanted to buy something with his 10 cents. So he kept. He said, "What can buy 10 cents?" What he meant, what can I buy? But he said, what can buy 10 cents? And he must have asked me 5 times, and every time we would say, Popsy, Popsy. And my friend was actually the teacher. She was the one that was answering him, because she had miles of patience. And then finally, it dawned on him that he didn't just have 10 cents, he had 2 nickels. He goes, oh, like that was going to get more. What can buy 2 nickels? And it's still just a popsicle. That's all you can get. So I learned a lot about patience that day. That was one. But anyway, another word for patience is endurance. So as we go through the lesson, you'll hear me refer back and forth from patience to endurance, and I may interchange those words. So, a lot of people start off well, but they don't always finish well. When they get to the finish line, we find that they cannot endure. I remember David Gibbs preached a sermon one time on, he was talking about his Christian testimony and how we're ambassadors for God. That we have our, when we're an ambassador for God, that we represent that person or that country. Ambassador for the United States represents the United States in these foreign countries. And so you have to remember who you work for, he said. And he was telling about in this particular sermon, he had gotten on an airplane and he went to sit down in the seat, and he said the seat was, he's not a small man, and the seat was not very roomy. And as he sat down in the seat, he mentioned about how small the seat was, and the stewardess said that it wasn't the seat that was small, it was him that was big, in so many words. And he said, my snarky lawyer self took over. And he said, I made a few comments back to her about how, well, I could do something about my size, but she couldn't do anything about her looks, kind of thing. And he mentioned, and he said he made some very unkind comments that later he regretted. And when he realized that he had a tract in his pocket so that he could give one to the flight attendant. And he said, she's not going to want to take this tract from me now after the way I acted. And so he went to apologize to her, and she was crying, and he felt very bad, and he apologized to her and told her that he had not represented the Lord well, and that he had let his personal feelings or his flesh or whatever get a hold of him. So anyway, when the flight was over, so she did forgive him and said, okay, but when the flight was over, the pilot was standing at the door waiting for him to exit, and he said, are you the man that apologized to the flight attendant? And he said, yes, sir. And he thought he was going to get scolded, and he said, I didn't represent the Lord very well, and I felt bad about that. He says, well, you didn't take off well, but you landed well. And to a pilot, that's what counts. As long as you land well, then everything's good. So, as a Christian, we may not start off well, but as long as when we get to the finish line, we endure or we land well, then that's what counts. To have spiritual endurance or patience, you must first have virtue or salvation, and then we do need that self-control to keep my fleshly desires from sidetracking me, and of course the patience is the quality that guards my heart. Now, a couple of definitions apply to patience. So the first one would be courage. Okay. And I would say that courage, sometimes it does take courage to exhibit patience, or endurance. That might be a more suitable word, since those are interchangeable. Courage does require sometimes, patience sometimes requires courage to defy the evil that's around you. If I work in a public job. It's not, people are, you may not believe this, but people are not always happy when they come into a government office. Can you imagine that? Especially when it's about their money. And so they're not always happy about that. And so when they come in, and they start to get a little loud or boisterous, I have to have patience with them and remember, and because I'm sometimes, my flesh wants to snap back too. Um, Another word that goes along with uh, the endurance or courage is resistance, okay? Resistance that is honorable to a man. So, a good definition, if we put all this together, the ability to remain faithful to God under pressure because my heart continually looks to God in faith for my strength and for possibly a reward. My reward would be that, somebody that came in grumpy and ill leaves happy and satisfied. That would be my reward. Or that, they noticed that something different, hopefully, about me that came from the Lord. So patience is not simply just controlling your temper. It's not simply gritting your teeth, or it's not simply tying a knot in the end of the rope and hanging on. Not Patience is not simply waiting out the storm. I mean, we can all do that. Really, when we had the hurricane a few months back, we didn't really have much choice of waiting out the storm, did we? We couldn't go anywhere, and we didn't have any power or anything else. There wasn't much we could do about it, so you just had to wait out the storm, and that was about all you could do. But there is usually an ethical issue that comes to play in endurance. Okay, in endurance of this kind, we're talking about not just hanging on and waiting out the storm, but we're talking about waiting out the storm with grace and with a testimony. In the Bible, the people that displayed patience maintained a response that glorified the Lord. For example, Noah. I'm sure that Noah got told more than once, y'all just give up building that big boat. I don't know what you're building and why you're building that. And Noah, I mean, come on, Noah, this is crazy. And they probably, made fun of him and treated him, I feel sure, pretty badly, because since the world was evil enough that the Lord wanted to destroy it, I'm sure they didn't just ignore Noah. They may have even come and tried to sabotage the boat, and he'd have to redo things. They may have played dirty tricks on him, or, they certainly weren't kind. Joseph is another example who was very patient and glorified God with his response. He didn't get angry. He didn't respond negatively. He didn't yell at people or yell at his brothers. And when he had the chance to retaliate against his brothers, he did not. Job, of course, is the supreme example of patience, isn't he? And how he just waited, and even when all those things happened to him, he said, naked came I into the world, and naked I'll go out if that's what the Lord wants. He was, the Lord's been good to him, he said. So those are examples of people that displayed patience with a response that glorified the Lord. Their situations could have tempted them to respond with anger, despair, anxiety, or any kind of outward sinful action. Think about King Saul. King Saul was not patient, and as a result, he was removed as king of Israel. When we have patience, we should be able to pray that we accept God's will, not with just dumb resignation, but with a holy joy. That is the hard thing to do. We have to accept God's will and accept it joyfully, not just, oh well, I'll do what I'm told to do. That's not the same thing. My mother, would tell me to take the trash out, and I didn't always want to stop what I was doing and take the trash out. And I had to do it cheerfully, And pretty soon I learned to do it cheerfully, whether I wanted to or not. Because if I didn't do it cheerfully, I found out I got a whipping. So you'll take the trash out, not just because I said so, but you will do it and you will enjoy doing it. And so I did learn to enjoy doing it, not complaining, but with a song of praise, because we had stuff that we got to throw away. We had things that we didn't need anymore. So, there's a lot of things that we can say that we may not always enjoy, but we can accept them with a song of praise instead of a song of grumblers. A lot of stories behind the hymns in our Bible are examples of that. I think about the song "It Is Well." I think we're all pretty much familiar with that one, where the man's entire family, except his wife, died on the voyage across the ocean. And so he lost all of his children, and yet he was able to write a song, "It Is Well With My Soul." He thought, that was, at least he had that, he said. So he didn't just accept it with dumb resignation. He accepted it with, Lord, I know your plan is better than mine. Missionary stories like Darlene Rose or Elizabeth Elliot, they accepted their plight and accepted. I think about Corrie ten Boom. I think we're all, she's one of the older missionary ladies that we might be familiar with, Jewish lady. And I believe her parents and her sister all died in a concentration camp, and she was the only one that survived. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 33 through 38, talks about some examples of people that endured. Who through, talking about, let's see, let me go back to verse 32. "And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, of Samson, of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and many of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to fight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection." And then it goes on and tells a little bit more. But we think about all of those that he mentioned. Fox's Book of Martyrs. They would often be burned at the stake, singing praises to the Lord as they were being burned alive or tortured. They endured. They certainly did endure, and they certainly glorified God in their testimony. Now, I have to ask myself, what does it take to make me stop enduring or stop doing the right thing? I have to, I want to endure. I want to have patience, but what would it take to make me stop doing the right thing? Do I stop being kind when I'm offended or something about someone doesn't appeal to me? Do I stop being kind to them? Do I stop being obedient because I don't agree with a policy or it's inconvenient to me, or I don't agree with a standard in the Bible? And that's inconvenient for me. I'm not going to do that. And would I? Is that what it takes to stop me? Do I stop exercising self-control because I'm discouraged, or because perhaps my friends are indulging and I don't want to be different? I don't want to be left out. So is that all it takes? Do I stop exercising self-control because I want to do something to make me feel better? So I'm going to do this thing even though I know it's wrong. or I know it's sinful, or do I have patience and I endure and say, Lord, I'm going to look to you for comfort instead of whatever this activity is? Do I stop seeking God in my Bible, and do I stop praying because my schedule gets busy? Or if something doesn't go my way and I get upset with God, God, you forgot about me, so I'm going to forget about you. Is that all it takes for me to stop serving the Lord? Do I stop being honest when I could shade the truth just a little bit to avoid getting into trouble? Or I shade the truth a little bit so I can get recognized for something that maybe I didn't even do, and I can get credit for that? Is that all it takes? Do I stop being a diligent worker when nobody is present to hold me accountable? Do I stop being a diligent worker if others are not doing what they're supposed to be doing? And I go, well, everybody else is doing it. And honestly, is everybody else doing it? Just because the majority's doing it doesn't mean everybody's doing it. And that's not the point. The point is that I'm supposed to do right no matter what others are doing. Do I stop sacrificing for people when they don't seem to appreciate it or no one notices what I've done? Is that all it takes? Do I stop taking hope in the promises of God and decide to become discouraged when I don't see the circumstances working in my favor or working as fast as I would like them to work or the way I want them to turn out? I think we all have an idea when something takes place. We all have an idea of how we would like it to turn out. We kind of write the ending to the story ourselves, and then if it doesn't turn out like that, we sometimes think that it's bad. When I was in college, I wanted to be a nurse, and I'm definitely not a nurse. Okay, the closest I come to a nurse is putting a Band-Aid on a sore finger or taking care of a hangnail. That's about the closest I come to a nurse. But so because I didn't become a nurse and my life didn't turn out the way I planned it to when I was in college, does that mean that I should get discouraged and stop taking hope in the promises of God? Or was that what my plan for my life was and not what God's plan for my life was? I saw myself getting married and having 2 or 3 children and, different things. And, we all have that little fairy tale in our mind of how we think our life's going to turn out. And mine, it didn't turn out the way I had expected, but I cannot say in any way that I'm unhappy with my life. And, I just want to mention this final thing as we close. A woman was facing her final months of life, but instead of anger, fear, and despair, she turns to 1 Peter 4:6. 1 Peter 4 and verse 6 says, "For this cause was the gospel preached also to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit." She greatly rejoices because her life has been an example of patience. And, her final months of life, but instead of fear, anger, and despair, she was thankful that she was able to live according to God in the Spirit.